In this video, I'm going to show how to deploy a Spring Boot project to Azure with the IntelliJ IDEA Azure plugin. And more specifically, I'm going to look at the changes that I had to make to an existing Spring Boot application to get it to deploy on Azure. There weren't many changes, and a lot of it was really just being more specific about a few things. But nonetheless, that's what I'm going to walk through. Azure has a really nice plugin with IntelliJ IDEA, and they have also a very nice web page that shows how to create a sample project and deploy it onto Azure. I walked through that and it worked great. It was flawless. Then I went back to my own project, tried the same steps, and it didn't work. And I spent several hours of pulling my hair out, comparing the two projects, and finally found the difference. So nonetheless, let's talk what we're going to need to do. We need to understand Azure. What is an app service? What is a resource plan? So on and so forth. I've described all of that in a separate video called Azure Fundamentals. I'll point you to that video and I will include a link to that video in the comments of this video. But it walks through what these different things are that I'm about to describe. So first, we understand what Azure is. Next, we create an Azure account. You can simply do that online. Navigate to azure.microsoft.com, and then you see I'm already signed in here, but if I weren't, I could sign up for an account, go to my account. This is where I can do all that admin. Next, create an app service plan and a resource group, and optionally an app service. The reason I say optionally is we do have an option to create that app service a little bit later in the process. As you might imagine, this is fairly straightforward to do. Just navigate to portal.azure.com. We can go to resource groups here. We can choose add. Subscription, that's what we started our account with. Typically, there's a trial version that's like a free subscription. After that, you have to go to pay-as-you-go. But even within the domain of pay-as-you-go, there are several resources that you can use that are free. Several other things we can do here. We can set the region of the resource group, so on and so forth. I have already created a couple resource groups, so I'm not going to bother and create a new one, but I will show you one that I already created. This is the one that I created for our application, the Plant Diary. And what you'll notice here is that it has both an app service plan and an app service. So let's take a look at the app service plan, and you see that there are a few other things that we've specified here. Still the pay-as-you-go subscription, and we have a resource group tied to this. But take a look over here. You notice that we have app service plan free. This is where we make that decision on level of service versus what we're willing to pay for. Now, free is not going to be very persistent. I found that a lot of times I'll host something on the free plan and it will be up, then it will restart, it will be down, and someone will say, hey, where'd all the data go? So, this is really good for learning, but if you're getting production ready, I would advise looking at some of the paid options. Nonetheless, we have resource, app service plan. Now let's take a look at our development environment. First, we need to install the Azure plugin. So let's go to File and Settings, and then under here choose Plugins. And this is like the plugin marketplace. So we can simply search for Azure. And you see that I have already installed this. If not, it would say Install here, and I'd click Install. After that happens, you get a little reminder, and I forget where it is right now. I think it was right up here. But you get a little reminder to sign in. And you want to sign in with your same Azure account that you created on the web. One handy thing that it does when you do that is it opens up a browser window and just gives you code to type in so you don't have to remember your password and all that stuff. It's fairly straightforward. Now, I was logged into Azure in a browser at the time. I think that helped out, so I'd advise the same thing. Go ahead and make sure you're logged in a browser so at least it knows who you are. Then it can do that little trick with enter this code and I'll confirm who you are. So that's how we get Azure installed. And now let's take a look at our pom.xml. And this is where I found I had to make a few changes to get this to deploy on Azure from what I started with. One important one that was actually probably the most tricky is if we take a look down at the top area here, we need to add packaging war, just like so, because Tomcat is expecting a war. War is a web archive. It's essentially a zip file full of Java stuff that can be run within Tomcat. One other that I found in dependencies is it's important to add this dependency for spring-boot-starter-tomcat. Without these two items, I found that I kept deploying and getting a 404. Those two ended up resolving it. A few other things worth checking. First of all, when we create an app service, it's going to ask us for a Tomcat version and Java version. Let's make sure that we're not compiling to a higher version. So right here you see 11. That's one of the options that it gives us at the time of this recording. Another option it gives us is Java 8. By the time you're watching this, there could be more options, but those are the two I saw so far. So have a look there. You'll see Java version there, and I'm comfortable with this one for now. I do want to show you the other places to look for Java version. So we go to Project Structure, and up on Project there's a Java version, and I freaked out initially because this is 14, which is greater than the Java version I have in Tomcat and Azure, but actually that's okay. We go to Modules, and this one is important. This one was 14, I knocked it down to 11. That's pretty good. We can take a look at artifacts, libraries, a few others, SDKs. We can see what actual Java version we're using there. That all works out well. One more sneaky one to look for. Settings again, and then we go to build, execution, deployment, compiler, and Java compiler. And you'll see a Java version here. Once again, as long as it's not greater than the version you're deploying to, you should be okay. When I went through my project, I saw a smattering of 11, 14, and 8, and I found that making them similar would help that. Okay, so we made a few changes to our Maven file. Let's go ahead and tell it to recycle. And now to deploy. I right-click, and I scroll down, and I look for Azure. If you don't see Azure here when you right-click on the project, you probably just didn't install the plugin. So rewind a little bit, make sure you installed the plugin. Now, deploy to Azure Web Apps. This screen's very important. First of all, for artifact, you see com.myplantdiary enterprise blah 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 snapshot. You might get an error here that says that this artifact is not valid because it needs to be a war. If that's the case, make sure you have this packaging war packaging entry here on the POM. Okay. So we have artifact, now we have web app. Now take a look at this plus. This is our app service that we're creating. I have already deployed to my plant diary, and that's the one I'm going to use. Take a look, you see Linux Tomcat 9.0 Java 11. So this gives me all of the version information that I need. Let's say you didn't have an app service. Easy. Remember I said you can create one later. This is where you create one. Click the plus. And here's where you can configure things like the name of the app service. And this is essentially a Tomcat instance is what you're creating. Tomcat, about a 40-50 megabyte application server, easy to download and spin up in a case like this. Take a look at all the different options. Linux, Java 8. We have Tomcat versions, we have JBoss and embedded web server. Linux, Java 11. Tomcat versions again. And then we have different Windows versions. So quite a few options you can try for there. I created this app service, My Plant Diary, on the Azure website, and I was able to give it a nice, memorable name. I just named it My Plant Diary 01 in case I had to delete and redo it. Probably at some point I'll just call it My Plant Diary. Nonetheless, that's why that kind of looks neat and tidy. Deploy to slot, that's not an option we have under a free account. The rest of the boxes I generally check, and then I'm going to go ahead and choose Run. What we'll see here that's interesting is it's going to kick off a Maven build because we gave it Maven as our artifact that we want to deploy. So it kicks off a Maven build and creates a war file. It's going to deploy this in just a moment, and it's essentially going to FTP up that war file. One thing I'll mention while we're waiting for the deployment is that I did go back to an old version in our commit history because I wanted to take out the idea of MySQL and queues and all the other things that we were using that I'd have to set up. I just want to do something very straightforward. That was very simple to do. I simply went to the Git window and then right-clicked and I chose Checkout Revision, and then I started building with that. So I will say this is a bit of a lighter version of the app than we've worked with in later videos, but nonetheless it deploys and you get the point. Speaking of deploy, I go back to this deployment tab and we can see that it's worked through several steps, and then it gives me the URL where this application has been deployed. So go ahead and click, and I'll just show you that it actually brought up this website for me when I deployed, and it gave me an error 403, the website has stopped. Not to worry there. When it deploys, it has to stop and restart the app server, and at the time it opened the browser here, the restart hadn't finished. So I'm going to take the same URL and go to a brand new window, and it will take a few moments as it unzips that WAR file, deploys the WAR file, so on and so forth. But in just a moment, we should have success. And here we go. Does this look maybe a little bit familiar? I hope so. Hit submit, and we see that sure enough, we were able to post this new specimen, and we were able to get a confirmation that the specimen posted. So in this video, I've done something I never thought I'd do. I deployed a Java-based Spring Boot project on a Linux operating system, thanks to Microsoft. But the reality is that's the world we're in right now, and that's the world where you can assemble an entire application and really even an entire business just by picking components off the shelf that already exist and choosing how to integrate them. And that's where Azure really excels. So, if you like this video, I'll point out a couple other ways you can deploy to Azure. One is directly from a Git repository, and another is directly from a CI/CD pipeline like CircleCI. Lots of different options there so that you write your code, you commit, and magic happens. I hope this video has been helpful, and I look forward to reading your comments. Thank you.